Today's video we're going to be unboxing and also setting up a new quadcopter from GepRC. Now this is called the Skip HD toothpick, even though it's not really a toothpick. It's a 3-inch, it's basically a micro quadcopter with toothpick components in here. And let's go ahead and crack this guy open and see what we get. Now I really like what GepRC is doing here with the packaging. It's not like iFlight. iFlight usually has a specific cutout foam that fits the quadcopter perfect. However, this will do the job just fine and protect just about everything you need. So more than likely, you'll have it arrive without any damage. Now let's take a look at some of the components they provide before going into the setup guide, because I've been getting a lot of emails of people asking me, okay, well, how do you set up a quadcopter? So that's what we're going to do. Plus it's raining today, so let's just do this. So we get two sets of 3018 gem fan propellers. So that's really nice. You're not going to be able to push on props like a 65mm because the shaft is way smaller here, and I think it's around a 1mm shaft. We'll double check that right now once we crack this open. So you get these propellers, you get proper propellers. That's really nice. Also, they give you all the tools you'll need and some spare stuff as well. So they give us just really crappy battery strap. They also give us this foam right here. I'm guessing it's for, you know, keeping the battery separated from the screws, so that's really nice as well. And some extra antenna mounts and some tools, which is a 1.5mm hex, and also a screwdriver. I think because of the motors, no, actually the motors are using a hex, but for the stack, basically, you're going to need the screwdriver if you're ever going to need to take that apart. Some extra screws. The CADX, they also give us the CADX remote here, which is also very useful. Some instruction manuals for the XM Plus, because this one has an XM Plus radio. And you have your VTX frequency chart, which is very useful, especially for the first time use, because not always A1 actually equals that frequency. In different, goggles and also in different video transmitters, they might connect to a different frequency, so keep that in mind. So this is really useful. And also they provide us with some stickers. Now let's put everything to the side here. And let's crack this guy open. So taking a closer look at this quadcopter, we see that it's using 1105 motors, which are 5000 kV. So I don't know the flight time of this, but I do highly suspect it's not going to be as efficient as the smaller toothpicks. However, this gives you, as I've seen, pretty good HD performance in terms of vibrations and everything of that nature, which we'll be testing in a later video or possibly in the same video if the weather clears up here. Now for the frame, they're going with an X configuration, so this is a true X. The frame does have some slight flex to it, but overall feels pretty rigid, which is something really nice. And also the attention to detail is also really great. We have an anti-slip battery pad right here, which is going to be very useful because these battery straps are not really great. Now, also what I really like seeing here, hopefully if the durability is pretty good, is the fact that they're using connectors for the motors. Now, this is going to make the process so much easier for anyone who doesn't have much experience into just quickly replacing a motor with just a connector. So it really does help out quite a lot because on something like this, if it had soldering points, it would be really, really tiny. And if you didn't have much experience, it would be an absolute nightmare and you would probably ruin it. Now, as you can tell here, we have this little extra wire also hanging down the side. This is supposed to be for your CADX HD camera's remote right here. So you could change out the settings, play with the settings as you please to get the picture quality as you'd like. So that's something really nice. And you always want to kind of make sure this is tucked in pretty good in a nice place. Maybe zip tie it with a really tiny zip tie somewhere. But make sure the zip tie doesn't touch the flight controller because that could add some vibrations because it would be touching the gyro and just adding some, extra movement that the quadcopter isn't actually doing, so keep that in mind as well. Now we also see that they've gone with the Crazy Bee type mounting style here for both all the boards here, and they're using the Diamond VTX up here, which I find pretty interesting. I don't know if it's a rebranded or if it is a GepRC OEM Diamond VTX up here. Usually those are good. I've never tried one on GepRC. I don't know which exact one they're using here, but the ones that I've used previously handle really, really great, and they usually do the job for a lot of things, especially in my area. So I really like that here. Now, but then again, they're also, like I mentioned before, using the Crazy Bee style board here. So what we have is we have the flight controller, the OSD, the power distribution, and as well as the ESCs all into one board. So if the ESC burned, you're going to have to replace this whole bottom board, which usually costs anywhere between $35 to, or we could say $30 to $40 right now. I haven't checked how much these cost, but that is a typical price of these right here. So for camera, they're using the CADX Turtle V2, and this one is going to be running the Whoop board right here. As you can tell, the mounting solution is just like those Crazy Bee boards in order for you to have a pretty clean stack here. Now, it does feel pretty heavy for a small, tiny 3-inch, But and again, this is not a toothpick. This is not considered in the toothpick class. This is a micro quadcopter right here, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people would agree with me as well. Now, another thing that I really like seeing here is they're really making sure that their quadcopter is going to be flying. And they've also added a 330 microfarad low ESR capacitor. This is very useful, especially on a board like this. And with this low ESR capacitor, it does many things. It increases the overall lifespan of the electrical components on board, can soak up these voltage spikes, can also help with voltage drops, and just overall keep the system running as clean as possible. And this is a really nice addition that they've done. And sometimes, you know, without a low ESR capacitor, you can have some really nasty vibrations or, you know, oscillations that can't not be tuned due to the problems with electrical noise. And this here buffs that out, solves most of it, and you should be good to go. Now, the canopy is also pretty massive here. It feels of good quality, but the print quality doesn't look so great. I mean, it doesn't have a really clean finish here. But yeah, I wish they would have done something slightly different here with that. It is pretty sturdy, so it should be hopefully pretty good against vibrations, which we'll be testing hopefully today, if not today, in a later video, maybe tomorrow's video. But I really want to get this going to test this guy out. And again, it does have full-fledged HD recording capabilities, which is a really nice little feature. And again, it does feel kind of heavy, but also it feels like most of the weight is down in the middle, so the center of gravity could be very nice on this. And usually you want to make sure you have the best center of gravity on these. These quadcopters are usually really sensitive to, you know, the center of gravity here most of the time, especially these little toothpicks. You know, sometimes you could put every time you switch a battery, it might fly slightly different. It's because the battery position, and it could be either nose heavy, or it could be tail heavy, or it could be side heavy. I mean, not side heavy, but it'll either be nose heavy or tail heavy, especially if you're running the battery like this. Try to keep the center of gravity as perfect as possible. It'll just give you a better overall flight experience. So let's go ahead and start the binding process and the setting up process. Now, as you can tell, we were using an XM Plus radio, which is an FR Sky, and it does have a really nice hole right here in order for you to access the bind button on the receiver, which is something really great and very well thought through, because that could be very annoying if you had to remove the whole canopy in order for you to access the receiver to bind this thing. And I'm really glad they've used an external receiver instead of the built-in receivers usually found on these Crazy Bee type boards, because it'll give you much more range, and it's going to add a little bit of extra weight, but at the end of the day you get much more range, and it's very useful. Now, also, before you start flying, you really don't want to leave these antennas hanging out like this. And this is the reason why they provide you with these right here. So what I'd recommend doing is grabbing one of these little straw things, find the middle, and just cut it right in the middle. So I think that's the middle right there. So once you cut it, then you want to go ahead and just slide it over your antenna. I'm pretty sure most of you know this, but just in case somebody doesn't know it, we'll do one together here. So you want to make sure that's in as tight as possible. You don't want to push too hard and break something. Alright, that looks great. And they also provide you with these right here, and those would be installed up here just like this. And now we have our antennas protected, which is really great, because once these antennas get cut, and it would really damage or really ruin your range most of the time. So it's very important to always protect your antennas, because once these get damaged, you're going to lose a lot of range, or at least a lot of penetration. Which means, you know, once you go behind a wall, you probably just lose the signal completely. So right now we've gone ahead and installed the antennas. Next thing we want to do is start the binding process. So right now I would consider this as basically ready, except one more thing, which would be the OSD wire. Now the OSD wire, you really don't want to put this white part on top of the most bottom board here, because that is where the flight control and the gyro lie. So you kind of want to have this white part be tucked in right above the second board up here, and that should minimize any kind of external vibrations on the gyro. So keep that in mind. It's not going to be a really big problem, but it's always better just to have it further away from the flight controller, or have anything farther away from the flight controller, so it doesn't bump into it, touch it through the wind, and then just have it flap and hit that gyro. And then your quadcopter's doing this and you don't know why. So let me go ahead and prepare the PC. We're going to plug the USB right on the bottom right here, log into Betaflight, and also start the binding process. All right, so the first step is going to be actually using a battery to enter bind mode. Now, the receiver is going to be up top right here, and the button is located right there. So you're going to have to use the screwdriver they provide you. Just keep pushing it until you feel a tactile click, and once you do, then bring in your battery and connect it. Now, if you did everything right, you should get a red light up here, which should be right there. You'll see that be a solid red light. And then we're going to go ahead and enter bind mode here. So I'm going to go ahead and just enter bind mode. And we should go to bind. Before I click it, I'd like to show you this so you can see how it. So there's the red light right there. I'm going to go ahead and click bind, and I'm just going to put 96 telemetry on here. You can see it blinking now. So that means that we are bound. We're not finished yet. You're going to have to exit the bind mode from the transmitter. And then we're also going to disconnect the battery. And once we plug the battery in, we should get a green light. So right now it's red, and it should go green right now. So it's going green. I think it's beeping right now because we need to configure the controller here. So I'm quickly just going to unplug this and plug this guy right in. And let's go and hop into Betaflight. All right, so right now we're going to go ahead and click connect once we are connected. Now, and again, the battery has been disconnected currently because the first thing I want to do is I want to go down to my modes right here and see what I have. Where's the beeper and everything? So the beeper right here, as we can tell, it's by default on, which is something I don't really want. And I'm going to go ahead and actually plug in the battery now. So it's going to be kind of annoying. So we can see that the beeper by default is already initialized. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove the beeper here. So the first thing you want to do is you want to set up your auxiliary switches. I'm hoping you already know how to do that. And where you want to do that is in the mixer tab. So you want to go to start with channel 5. So my channel 5 is D, which is going to be auxiliary 1 because auxiliary 1 starts counting at channel 5. Now, if you don't know that, what you can do, for example, I want this to be my arming. So for example, we can go to the arm right here, which is basically already set up. We can say add range, leave it on auto, and once you flick the switch, it'll automatically switch that to auxiliary 1. So this is where I want it to arm right here, and you can see it goes down here. So this is my arming right now. Auxiliary 2 is correct, but I usually like it to start off in angle mode. So I have auxiliary 2 on angle mode. Now, if you don't know what angle mode, it's basically super stable mode that won't allow the quadcopter to flip upside down and keep it at a maximum angle. So you want to kind of keep always angle mode. The reason why I keep angle mode is, for example, a fly or a bug came around me, I could pop it into angle mode, reorient myself without crashing the quadcopter. And this is why I always keep angle mode on my quadcopters. Horizon is a bit tricky, especially if you're starting out. I don't really recommend you use it because if you deflect the switch all the way or the gimbal all the way like that, it'll actually do a complete flip. And if you weren't expecting that, it could be an absolute nightmare. So I usually just remove Horizon because I don't need it. Now you might be like, well, how do I enter acro mode? Well, acro mode is basically you enter in acro mode when you choose no mode. So right now we can see that right here we have no mode selected, and neither here, once I flick the switch, we have no mode selected. So this would be considered acro mode. And by default, it's already in angle mode right there. And if we scroll down, we can go to the beeper. So I'm going to go ahead and use the beeper. Now it uses its motors to beep, which is really cool. And I usually like it as one of these switches. So it's going to be this one right here. So that's great. As you can tell, I did it on auto. So like this, when it's off, it's not buzzing. And once I go ahead and flick the switch, it's going to start buzzing. As we can tell, we can save it, and we can show you that right now. So you can see that. So that works great. So another thing, you want to kind of keep the quadcopter away, because when it's too close, then it's just gonna disconnect when it's really, really close. So here, this is my flip over after death. It's going to be on auxiliary 4, and I want it, once I flick the switch, it goes into flip over after death mode, which is a really great mode here. And that should be set for my switches here. Now also, what you want to do is you want to go to the receiver again, and we can see that auxiliary 12 is going crazy here. Now what that is, that's the RSSI. That's our signal that's going to be routed into our on-screen display. And as you can tell, it's already correct on auxiliary 12. Now we know we never set anything, and if I move the controller away and move across the room, you can see that playing back and forth. Now another thing you also need to take note of here, as you can tell, my quadcopter is flipping. Like this, it will never arm. And the reason for that is the channel map. So my channel map here is not going to work because this is the default. Now, even if I go to FRSky, as you can tell, this is an FRSky, it still won't work. If it's doing this, where you're going to need to go is you need to go to Spectrum here, and the channel mapping order would be TAER1234. And if we click save, and now we see that everything operates perfect. So here's our pitch, here's our left roll, right roll, and everything is working great. Here's our yaws. So that is perfect. So like that, we will be able to arm and be able to fly just fine. Next thing we want to do is we want to go to the configurations tab. and double check this is not turned on. Now, if it is turned on, then you're gonna have to install your propellers backwards. And I'll also show you how to install propellers on this video, because I guess it's a very overlooked problem for a lot of new people. However, like this, we are going to install them in the default way, which I'll show you in a bit. So that's really great. Motor stop is not turned on. That means once you arm it, the motors will actually spin. And if we scroll down a little bit more, everything looks good here. Air mode's on, OSD. Yeah, everything's looking so far so good. Yeah. And that's really it. Everything's looking great. So now like this, our quadcopter is basically 100% ready for flight. And it's very important you double check your receivers tab and make sure the quadcopter is not going crazy and it actually responds correctly to what you're doing. And you can also check this up here. For example, here's a left roll, here's a right roll, here's a pitch, here's a back pitch. This is the yaw, and this is the throttle here. And then auxiliary 1, which is going to be my arm. This is for my modes, this is for that, and that's for my buzzer. And everything is working really, really great. Now we see everything is working great here. So the next thing you want to do is you want to basically disconnect and bring in our quadcopter into place here. Unplug the USB, unplug the power, make sure no propellers are on, and we're going to double check if everything is working here. Now I have to move my controller further away so I can get signal. And if I arm, it should arm, and that's perfect. That means everything is working great. So now we know our quadcopter arms. Now if it doesn't arm, you need to go ahead and double check your channel mapping here. So once all this is done, then we need to go into the propeller side. Now the propeller side, there's a little technique that I use, which is really easy, but there's basically two techniques to use. Okay, so right now we got our propellers. Some might have a little extra marking that'll help you know which one goes where, but not always they have this. So as you can tell, this propeller has an R after the number. So it might be a little bit difficult to see this, but it does have an R right after the number. That means it's a reverse propeller. And the way to know where this goes, from knowing one propeller, you'll know how every other propeller is going to be installed. So when it has an R, the first motor you want to put it on is the back right motor. So that's a really great way to remember it. R, and this is the back right motor. Now what you want to do is you want to copy the same scheme diagonally. So we're going to go ahead and find the other R propeller. And I'll also show you the other technique if the R isn't there. So I'm just looking for the R propeller right now. So here's another propeller with the letter R after the writing, and this should be exactly across diagonally right here. So that would have our propellers ready. Now we can grab the other propellers. So now our propellers are installed. Obviously you still need to install those screws, but let's go into the other technique. So for example, let's say there was no R on these propellers. What can you do? Well, like I mentioned, you want to make them go into parallel lines just like this, exactly like that. And what you want to look for, if you know you got this right, is look on the inside blade and make sure the high side is up. So it's basically making like a little triangle here. So it's basically making a triangle like that. So the blade here, this is the lowest part, this is the highest part. This is the lowest part, and this is the highest part. And they're connecting like this as a little triangle here. And same thing goes for that. You can see it's really difficult to show you. But I'll probably see how that's the high side. You always want that on the inside, and this is the low side. Now, if you saw the on the configurations tab inside Betaflight, if it said reversed, then you have to do this backwards. So the R here would have to go here, and that would go here. So if it's reversed, some of them do come reversed, but you can also turn it off and install it like this, and you should be fine. So it would just be an inverted triangle basically if the motor direction was reversed in Betaflight. However, here we don't have them reversed, we have them as a default setup, and that's all you need to take note of is the innermost propellers, once they are parallel, to make a triangle going up. So the low sides would be out, the high sides would be in, and it should be very easy, especially if you don't have writing on the propellers. However, most of these propellers do have the R's, which will really help you. And then you're going to want to align the motor holes right there, or the propeller holes to the motor holes, and just start installing the screw. Don't force the screw in. If it's not going in, realign it, pop the screw back out, and then put it back in. Don't over tighten them either, because you could strip the motor bell. These are really tiny motors, and that usually happens on a lot of motors, so keep that in mind just in case, so you don't really screw anything over. And here are the screws they provide in the packaging for them. And well, that was a pretty long ass video. I really hope it was useful to some people out there. The flight footage will definitely be in the next video, because this video has been a very long video, and I really hope you guys enjoyed it. Everything is linked down below. Come join my Patreon to win this guy and win a ton more. I'm going to release my Patreon giveaways, which are going to be actually all of this right here. So this is this month's giveaway right now for the month of November, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things, possibly even more. I'll see what I have left over from reviews, and I'll be giving those out. And I have a bunch of new micros for the month of December and pre-built quads, so don't miss out, and everybody gets a chance, even new Patreons. I have 0 Patreons this month. Anyone that's new can basically, you know, if you're the only Patreon, then you're gonna win that giveaway, because I do a separate giveaway for new Patreons and also a premium giveaway, not some crappy ass giveaway. And I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out, guys.